This is going to be a review of things I've talked about before, but I think it's very, very important. I want to talk about manliness.
Yes.
I am, by definition, a man of God. So it is very important that I understand what it is to be manly if I'm going to be a man of God. And I want to talk about that and what manliness really is, what being a man really is being virtuous. And virtuous is having the courage to do what God commands regardless of the personal cost. It's not big muscles.
That's right.
It's not a big truck.
That's right.
It's not a cool hot rod. It's not being the best in sports. It's not being able to out-cuss. See how many beers you can slam down. That's not manhood. Manhood is, and nor is it being a bully. Let me add that one in the equation. It's having the courage to do what God commands regardless of the personal cost. And when you understand that's what it is, you realize we live in a world with few men.
You got that right.
Got a lot of males. You don't have a lot of men. Now let me give you a couple of verses along this line. And come over to 1 Kings. In fact, I'd say one of the greatest hurts and wants in this society today is the want of men.
That's right. That's right.
1 Kings chapter 2, 1 through 3. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die. You know, there is a time when that's the right thing to do, is die. You've lived your life. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. And that's true. We're all going to get old and die. There is no escaping that, people. And you know what's sad? Is to see old people that have not accepted that. That is sad.
You got that right.
I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong, therefore, and show thyself a man. And here's what's involved with that. And keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses. Be a man and do what God said. That's what it is. That thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. And I will couple that with Joshua chapter 1 and verse 7. The Lord's instructions to Joshua. Only be thou strong and very courageous. Courageous for what? That thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand, to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. It takes courage to live by the Bible.
You got that right.
It takes courage to do what God says to do. And I want you to see two things that are connected together. Strength and courage. And the degree to which a man lacks courage, to that degree he lacks strength. Be thou strong and very courageous. In fact, the Bible says in the end of Psalm 31, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. So God's strength flows to courageous people, not to cowards. And so being virtuous is having the courage. Being a man is being virtuous, which is having the courage to do what God commands regardless of the personal cost. And this becomes evident when we define the term virtue, which I preached on before and have need to preach again, because it's the first thing that God tells you in 2 Peter 1 to add to your faith. First thing, virtue. And this applies to women as well as to men. Women need to be courageous too, to do what God says. And you know the sad thing is we have three people in the Old Testament that are spoken of as being virtuous, and all three are women. Sometimes women show more courage and sense and wisdom than men do, I'm sorry to say. Virtue comes from the Latin word virtus, which means manliness, hence the title of the sermon. It means valor, which is courage, worth, etc. Coming from the Latin word vir, spelled V-I-R, but pronounced wir, man. Virtue comes from the word man. And here's the definition. It is conformity of life and conduct with the principles of morality. In other words, it's making your life take shape according to what God told you to do. because He's the one that gives us the principles of morality. It is voluntary observance of the recognized moral laws or standards of right conduct. And where do we get our moral laws and standards from right conduct? We get them from God Almighty, because it says He is the lawgiver. How is it written? It's in the Epistle of James. The Epistle of James in chapter 4, where it says of God in verse 12, there is one lawgiver who is able to save and destroy. So we get the recognized moral laws and standards of right conduct from God, the one lawgiver. But observe that in this definition, not only is a virtuous person a person who conforms himself to those moral laws and principles, but he does so voluntarily. He does so because he chooses to, because he wants to.
Yes.
To do the right thing because you are forced to do so is not virtue. To do the right thing because you want to do so and because you choose to do so, that is virtue. That's what it is to be a man. And then it is abstention on moral grounds from any form of wrongdoing or vice. A virtuous man will abstain from that which is wrong for one reason only, because it's wrong. He doesn't have to have any other reason other than this is the right thing to do and this is not the right thing to do. That's all he needs, is to know right from wrong and to want to do what's right and avoid what is wrong. He doesn't look at the reward. He doesn't look at what it's going to get him in terms of popularity. He's not looking at how it's going to gain him a place in his career. He's doing it for one reason only, because it's the right thing to do and because he wants to do the right thing. That's a man. That's virtue. But not only is it just conforming to the laws given us by the one lawgiver, but it's manifested also in foregoing what is lawful out of conviction and to set an example. It's also manifested in foregoing what is lawful out of conviction and to set an example. I'll give you a couple of examples of that principle. Now we come over to Jeremiah chapter 35. Jeremiah 35. And this is the story of the Rechabites. And Jeremiah was told by the Lord to go to the house of the Rechabites and bring them into God's house, into the chambers, and give them wine to drink. Just put the booze right in front of them. And they had these pots full of wine and cups they could drink to their fill. God had told the prophet, put it in front of them. It was a test. And they refused to do so. And we read in verse 6, and look at the reason. But they said, we will drink no wine. Now, the reason is not because God in His law told us we can't, because there was no such law. God's law allows the moderate usage of wine and strong drink. But why didn't they do it? We will drink no wine, for Jonadab, the son of Rechab, our father, commanded us, saying, ye shall drink no wine, neither ye nor your sons forever. Neither shall ye build house, nor sow seed, nor plant vineyard, nor have any, but all your days ye shall dwell in tents, that ye may live many days in the land wherein ye were strangers. And thus have we obeyed the voice of Jonadab, the son of Rechab, our father, in all that he charged us. To drink no wine all our days, we, our wives, our sons, and nor our daughters, nor to build houses for us to dwell in, nor to have we vineyards, nor field, nor seed, but we dwell in tents. God's law did not require men to dwell in tents. God's law did not forbid men to sow seed and to reap. These people were drinking no wine and living the life of nomads because Jonadab, their father, said, this is what I want. Their leader, the authority figure in their life.
Yes.
Now the question arises, Why did Jonadab make such a requirement of his family? I do not know. We could speculate till the cows come home, but I don't know. But I know this. Jonadab their father was obviously a man that commanded respect by the way he lived. And he obviously had his reasons that were compelling enough that they would follow his leadership. See, that's what I call a conviction. A conviction born out of the example and commandment given by their leadership and their authority figure, and out of the deep respect they had for them. And God honored that kind of conviction, as you see later in the chapter. I'll give you another example from the Apostle Paul himself. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. When Paul was among the Thessalonians, he not only ministered to them, but he worked with his own hands to provide income for himself. And he said in 2 Thessalonians 3:7, For yourselves know how ye ought to follow us. For we behaved not ourselves disorderly among you. Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught. For we behaved not ourselves disorderly among you, neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you. Not because we have not power. Paul had the power. Paul had the right to be chargeable. He was working for them, ministering the Word of God, and they that preach the gospel should live of the gospel.
Amen.
But because of special circumstances and problems with busybodies and lazy people in that church, Paul forewent what was his power to set an example. The principle, the conviction of example. Not because we have not the power, but to make ourselves an ensample unto you to follow us. That's what you call conviction. Convictions are born out of experience, out of the authority figures of our lives, out of cutting off avenues of temptation, out of setting example to people over whom we have influence. So sometimes you forego things that are lawful for those reasons. That's called conviction. I'll give you one example outside myself, and then I'll give you one from myself. You'll notice that Conrad Gerald, every Sunday he comes to church, wears a sport coat. You know why he does that? It's what his dad did. It's what his dad said he should do. That man died when Conrad was 16 years old. That man is still exerting influence over him 61 years later. That tells me a lot about what kind of man he was. And he bred that conviction in him. Now, Conrad doesn't make that a law for other people. He never made it a law for other people in his ministry. But it was something that he does for himself out of conviction and respect for a man that had been an authority figure and a leader in his life. Do you read me? And it makes a lot of sense. Now, a second reason Conrad wears blazers is because the man has no blood.
You got that right.
And the man would get chilled on the equator in the middle of the summertime. So help me. He wears his sports coat to the church picnic in the summer when it's sweltering.
And long johns.
And long johns. So one reason is the fact that he's bloodless, not spineless, but bloodless. And the second reason, and really this is at the heart of it, is a conviction. born from one for whom he had profound respect. May I speak to myself? I do not have an iPhone. I do not have a smartphone. You know one of the big reasons I don't? Conviction. A conviction that most of you do not share. But I have that conviction. I have the technology. I have it in my laptop. I have it in the iPad you gave me that now is upstairs because I integrated some of those features into my laptop because I did not like being strung between a laptop and an iPad over here. I didn't like sitting between two digital devices. So the iPad went upstairs. I still use it some. Foreign language dictionaries is one of the main uses. But even there, I quit sitting it in front of me at the breakfast table when I'm doing my foreign language reading, as I did for a while. Why did I do that? Conviction! Because it is a fact. The more you use those things, the more dependent you become on them. And the more dependent you become on them, the more it becomes an addiction. Because the very soul of addiction is dependence. And so I use my books. I go to the iPad when the word doesn't occur in the dictionary and I can't figure it out. And I want so much to know what it means. I will then go there and look for it. Or when I come across a complex sentence and I can't make sense out of it, I'll use it to help me decipher the sentence. Because I'm one of these people, I want to know what I'm reading. I want to know the meaning of words. That's a passion of mine. But that's a conviction. I have the technology, but I cannot bring myself to want to take all that technology and wrap it up in some little square thing and stick it in my pocket and take it with me everywhere I go. From the advent of the cell phone, I never could wrap my mind around why we have to have a telephone with us and have it on so that we can be contacted everywhere we go. I can't wrap my mind around that. And I will not deny that at times I have thought of getting one. And I will not sit here and tell you I will never have one because I see the way they're pushing the technology. The day may come that if you're going to have a phone, that's the only kind you're going to have. But I'm not there yet. And I don't want to go there out of conviction. Did you get it? Conviction. You get it? I'll look at the possibility of getting it for economic reasons. So far, it's not economically feasible. But when I do, there's something in me that just... You see, for many of you, the convenience and what you can do with it draws you to it. And the very things that draw you to it are the things that cause me to be nervous about it. See, we're coming from two different perspectives. You understand that? Two different perspectives entirely. And what pulls you toward is what scares me about it. Because there is one thing I know, and this is not open for debate. It is addictive. And the more things you do with it, the more dependent you become upon it. The more dependent you become upon it, the more it becomes an addiction. Got to keep it on. Somebody might be trying to reach me. Oh my God. I'm at least as important as you are. You know what that is? That's addiction. That's a programming of yourself. And I think about this from some time to time, and I will admit, even with what I have to fight to keep it from taking me over. Because there's something about it that has this pull. I'll tell you as an example, one thing that I do now, I didn't do for a long time, but when I got the iPad, I started it. And this is one of the features that I integrated into my laptop, is I do texting. For a long time I didn't do that. I do that now. And I will tell you two main reasons I do that. And listen, This is not open for discussion. Texting is addicting. Look at the public. Look at the public. And especially when they're on their social networks, it's even worse. My conviction is born out of three things principally. Number one, what I see happening in the culture around me, which is obvious. Number two, the studying and the reading, extensive reading and research I've done about this, and the proof of what it's doing, and how it targets the brain and alters the way we think. And third, out of painful experience with people who have abused it. That's where it's coming from, people. Those three things. Those three things. But anyway, one of the reasons I text is because sometimes you don't really want to have a conversation. You just want to slip a quick piece of information and be done with it. And that's the reason I'm here for it. And I get that. I get that, okay? But have you ever noticed something? When you start down that alley with people, because you want to just have a quick exchange without getting involved in a conversation, have you noticed what happens? That ends up being the only conversation you have with some people, because that is the only way they will let you through.
You got that right.
So that's my second reason. That if I'm going to have contact with some people, that's the only way I'm going to have it. If I call the number on their phone, they don't answer. I leave a voicemail, they don't return the call. I text, I get a response like that. Phones have never been more ubiquitous and never less answered.
You got that right.
And then parents, that all they ever get, or grandparents, from their children or their grandchildren are quick little snippets of a text. I was in the sauna and listening to this old man lamenting that all he got from his grandson were little snippets of a text. Wouldn't you like to hear the voice of your grandchild? Wouldn't you like to have a conversation and hear the voice of your child? But instead, quick little snippets, and that's all you get. And I find doing that, there's something about that, and I've read about it. They say it's the same psychological mechanism, brain chemical mechanism that happens with slot machines. You have this strange urge to want to keep checking for the next text. Check, 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 check. That's what you see people doing with these phones. Walking around with them in their hands. I can tell you one reason why people take them everywhere they go. I'll tell you one reason. For the same reason that people who smoke cigarettes take a pack of cigarettes with them everywhere they go. They're hooked. That's why. Got to get your fix. That's why. And I even catch myself with having the texting mechanism on my laptop, wanting to check, check, check. So you know what I did? I'll still text, but I fixed it where my iPad doesn't alert me I have a text. Which means I'll find that out when I want to, just like email, and limit the amount of time I go and check that. So my message to all of you is this: if you text me, don't expect an instant response. Because I want to break that pull to check, 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 check. Text, 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 text. See, I have the same human nature as the rest of the monkeys out there. And if they're doing it, I know I could end up there. And so could you. So for me, at this point in my life, and this could change, but it's a matter of conviction. When I first started courting my wife, she never wore slacks. And she didn't wear miniskirts when miniskirts were in style. That's one of the things that attracted me to her. Because I looked at that woman and I said, this woman's got character. And you know why she didn't? One of the reasons she didn't? I think she forgot this, and I had to remind her of it. I said, because her dad didn't like it. Now that modified in that home as the years went by, but at that point, she didn't do it for that reason. Her daddy didn't like it. That's character. That's character, people. But I want to tell you something. I had a conversation with Chad Wagner this week, and I'll get off this soapbox, but I'm never going to leave it entirely. Because you know what? It's the modern Baal I'm fighting.
You got that right.
And I'm not going to let you get comfortable with it. I'm going to stay on your case, even though you do not share my conviction on this. You do not. But one thing that compels me is that I have to set an example, because I know wherever I am on this, this is where you're going to be. And if I move over here, you're going to move over here. If I'm going to move over here, you're over here. It's the price I pay for leadership. But you parents, you grandparents, you are in a position of leadership and influence as well. What message are you sending?
You got that right.
And if you've got kids and you've got grandkids that are addicted to this stuff and you look at it with concern, I want to ask you one question. Where did that start? Who started it? Who started it? You did. Now you reap it. But I had a conversation with Chad Wagner, and I was talking about possibly having one of those things. Chad has it. And Chad does not do social networking. He has disciplines imposed on himself about that, and he warns people about it. He's got 2 nieces. His brother bought them phones and gave them to him, and they're on them constantly, and he's just sick about it. Constantly. Sick about it. You know what he told me? And when he said this to me, I thought he was joking. I said, Chad, are you serious? He's got one. He said, don't get it, man. He said, because your life will get configured around it and it will control you. He told me, Ben, stick to your guns on not getting a smartphone. You can be one of the last remaining voices of reason that can warn and exhort about the dangers of these things, not only with words, but by example. Oh, I said, Chad, you make my day. I appreciate your honesty, your willingness to admit the truth about it. You see, people, the main ingredient in any addiction is denial. Never forget that. Never forget that. I admire Matt Ruma for something. He got an app and he put it on his phone that shows every time he picks it up. He was shocked. He didn't even realize how often he did it till he put that discipline on himself. And I suggest before you tell me I'm not addicted, you try that. And then let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. He was surprised. But so anyway, I'm done with that. Let's get back to the subject of manliness, but other than just to say this, that sometimes manliness is not only doing what God said to do, but having convictions born out of experience, born out of respect for authority, born out of cutting off avenues of temptation, born out of the need to set an example, and standing by your convictions when nobody else is standing with you. And let me tell you, when you have men that lack virtue, the times are very dangerous indeed. In Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 1. Oh, that and I'll tell you this. I've actually had people tell me that they would be further into this stuff than they are if I wasn't up here barking about it. I've had them tell me. And isn't it a fact that after I preach on this for about a couple of weeks, you really clean up your act? For about maybe 2 weeks? Where you go back to doing whatever it was you were doing before? What's the first thing when you're in a doctor's office and you got to wait for See the doctor, what's the first thing you do? What's the first thing you do? What's the first thing you have an impulse to do? What will be the first thing you have an impulse to do when you get in your car today? Huh? What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Huh? Did you know that when I did that thing of turning off the notification signal on getting texts, I had a kind of a sick feeling in my stomach that I had cut myself off from the world? You know what that sick feeling tells me? That thing already had its tentacles wrapped around me, or otherwise I wouldn't have had that sick feeling. That's what that tells me. That's what that tells me. Now, it doesn't tell you that, but it tells me that. And why am I telling you stuff like this? Because I want you to know that Ben Mott takes heed to himself and watches himself, because if I don't take heed to myself, I'm not fit to take heed to you.
Yes.
You understand that? It's very important. But I've had people that will tell me that if it weren't for me up here carrying on about it like I do, they'd be further into it than they are. And while it is rewarding to know that I'm having some effect, there's also a very discouraging thing in that. And that is, for all the years you've sat under my ministry, you never developed the discernment enough to see where that was taking you until I slammed you upside the head with an iron frying pan. That doesn't speak well of you, and it's discouraging for me. Did you get what I just said? Did you get what I just said?
Amen.
Did you get what I just said? And if it invoked shame, it should have. It was intended to do so. That's what authority figures are for, to put us in shame for things in our lives that we're not controlling like we ought to. But in Jeremiah chapter 9, to show you the danger of the times when you don't have men, when you don't have virtue. Oh, that my head were waters, and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. And I feel like this sometime. Oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place of wayfaring men, that I might leave my people and go from them. Pat and Sonia Dam just went to a resort. When you go to this resort, no phones allowed. Sounds good to me. Jeremiah wanted to go to a place like that. That's just what it was. And go from them, for they be all adulterers and an assembly of treacherous men. People you can't trust. And they bend their tongues like their bow for lies, but they are not valiant. They lack courage for truth upon the earth. For they proceed from evil to evil, and they know not me, saith the Lord. Take ye heed every one to his neighbor, and trust ye not in any brother, for every brother will utterly supplant, and every neighbor will walk with slanders, and they will deceive every one his neighbor, and will not speak the truth, and they've taught their tongues to speak lies, and weary themselves to commit iniquity. Dangerous times. Times in which you can't trust people. And we're there, people. Do you realize there was a time when a man's word was his bond? Now everything you got to do, you got to give all this ID for everything. You should see, you shouldn't see the hurdles I've had to go through to get the money my sister left from my mother. The legal hurdles, because there's so many kids that'll rape their parents of their money and rob them of their inheritance. So there's all these legal bureaucratic hoops in place. And I can understand that, to protect my mother from a rapacious child, which I am not. But because of the general dishonesty of the times, because nobody's valiant for truth, we're going through all this these legal hurdles. It's sad, but it's the commentary of our times. Now, if manliness is virtue, and it is by definition, then it follows that the most virtuous man, the sinless and holy one, Jesus Christ, was the manliest of men, the very perfection of manhood. And he is so called in Ephesians chapter 4. in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 13. Ephesians 4:13. Till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man. And what is that? Unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. Jesus Christ was the perfect man. Now, while there is nothing, brethren, wrong with being an athlete and enjoying sports, understand this: that is not what being a man is all about. There is no record that our blessed Lord ever played a sport. Some of these football players and some of these ball players are scumbags morally. Nothing for our young people to respect.
You got that right.
No matter how skillfully they can throw the ball. I am right about it. Psalm 147. Psalm 147. Some of these guys abuse women. And I'm going to tell you, one of the most important characteristics of true manhood is knowing how to treat a woman.
Amen.
To treat her with tenderness, kindness, courtesy, respect. Psalm 147, 10 and 11. He delighteth not in the... This is our God. Delighteth not in the strength of the horse. He's not over there. Woo, 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 woo. Sunfire won the Kentucky Derby. He doesn't get excited about that. I guess there's a horse named Sunfire. I don't know. I made that up. I don't keep up with the Kentucky Derby, so I had to grab some kind of name. Sunfire sounded like a pretty good one to me. Psalm 147, 10, he delighteth not in the strength of the horse. He taketh not pleasure in the legs of a man. Those big thighs. God doesn't see anything very impressive there. Remember, our blessed Lord had no form nor comeliness that we should desire him. I bet he looked scrawny. Pray, and he says, the Lord taketh pleasure in them that fear him, in those that hope in his mercy. Manhood is not strutting about like Mr. Tough Guy and getting into fights and getting drunk and seducing one woman after another, as some men think it is. A man who lives like that is a pitiful weakling, being led by his sinful passions or by the crowd. Because you see, virtue, which is manliness, requires the subjugation of passions. Bringing the body and its passions, that's its appetites, under control, not giving free rein to them, as some people think is being real manly. No, it isn't. It's being a weakling. It's exactly what it is. King Solomon, the one that David said to, show thyself a man, wrote the book of Proverbs and extols wisdom, which brings life to its highest potential. And the one thing that Solomon is constantly advancing is self-control. Control of one's passions. Controlling your appetites for food, for drink, for alcohol. Controlling your temper. Controlling your spending. And controlling your appetite for pleasure. Self-control is the essence of virtue. Let me tell you, the degree to which you do not have control over something in your life, some passion in your life, some appetite in your life, whether it's for alcohol or sex or watching TV or drinking pop, the degree to which you lack control over that is the degree to which you have not grown up yet. It is children that do not have control over their appetites, and therefore parents must impose restraints and rules upon them to keep that in check. The sign of maturity is when one can control that on his own without having to have a boss over him to say, it's too much, don't do that, don't do that. Virtue, which is manliness, requires the subjugation of the passions. Some men put on a rough, and I've seen this before, and it absolutely nauseates me. Some men put on a rough and tough exterior and surround themselves with guy things like a cabinet full of weapons, building big muscles, and the avid pursuit of sports to hide the fact that inside they are pitiful cowards and wimps who will compromise what they know is right to pacify a domineering woman or a spoiled child or to avoid the mockery of companions. You see it all the time. I see these guys at the gym that are built, these guys are built. Walking around with their little digital mama in their hands. They, in the sauna, in the whirlpool, while they're working out, in between sets, their little digital mama. That's what it is, a digital mama in their hands. And they think they're so tough and they're so man. Oh, Brendan, did you hear what I just said back there? About self-control being the essence of manhood, controlling one's appetites. Did you get that? That's important. I want you to get that. I want all of you to get it. Controlling your appetite for food, drink, pleasure. Controlling your spending and all those kinds of things. Very important. Including drinking pop. Kids, stuff's addicting. And the degree to which you do not control that is the degree to which you lack maturity. In that and any other thing. And any other thing. Any other passion. The original McGuffey's reader, the eclectic third reader, had this to say: a good man shines amiably through all the obscurity of his low. Reason I singled Brendan out as he went back. I wanted to make sure he heard that. See, I want my grandkids to learn this stuff, and he was back in the bathroom, so I didn't want him to miss the point. That's why I repeated it. Oh, okay. Well, now, I will say this. For a growing boy, they have to eat a lot of food. Just make sure it's good food that nourishes instead of junk.
That was going to be 7 feet tall.
I know it. I remember what it was like to be a teenager. You got to cut teenagers that one. Those boys, they have to eat. And boy, do they ever. But eat good food. But anyway, a good man shines amiably through all the obscurity of his low condition. And a wicked man is poor, degraded wretch in the midst of all his splendor. Let me say that again. A good man shines amiably through all the obscurity of his low condition, and a wicked man is a poor, degraded wretch in the midst of all his grandeur.
You got that.
Come on. How manly is it? How manly is the guy who wastes hours playing computer games and sports and yet can't decide what he wants to do with his life?
Got it.
Ouch. But it's true. It's true. When Pilate brought Jesus Christ before the mob, turn to John 19. John 19. When Pilate brought Jesus Christ before the mob in a purple robe and wearing a crown of thorns, let's see what he said. In John 19:1, and then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers platted a crown of thorns, this is mockery, and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. And said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hands. And Pilate therefore went forth again, and saith unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. And then came Jesus forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate saith unto them, Behold the man! From the viewpoint of man, Christ was the picture of pitiful weakness. But Christ was submitting to the will of God, His Father, suffering shame and reproach to save our souls. He was doing what God commissioned Him to do. He respected His Father's wishes. And He did this to save our souls. And there was never a greater demonstration of virtue or of courageous manhood than when our blessed Savior submitted to the sufferings and indignities of the cross. Because by this weakness, from human standpoint, Christ saves us not simply from dying as a hero might do, but He saves us after we are dead, which no hero can do. And so it is any wonder then that we read in 1 Corinthians 1:25 that the weakness of God is stronger than man. You see, without realizing it, Pilate proclaimed the truth respecting manhood. The one man that was being there maligned and scorned and reproached for telling the truth and for doing the right thing and going against the grain of the crowd and bearing every kind of indignity, standing there. And Pilate says, behold the man.
Yeah.
The world would look at that and see weakness. But Pilate really saw what it was there. Manliness. And yet this man of men was so rejected and ridiculed that he said this of himself in the prophecy. And this goes deep, children. In Psalm 22:6 he said, but I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men and despised of the people. To save men, the man was treated as no man. Whew. Matthew Henry, commenting on this, said he was reproached as a bad man, as a blasphemer, as a Sabbath breaker, as a wine bibber, as a false prophet, as an enemy to Caesar, and as a confederate with the prince of devils. I mean, how much more insult can you heap on one person? And that was your blessed Lord. And he did that for you. And he didn't have to do it.
That's right.
He had the power to call down 12 legions of angels to put a stop to the whole affair. But he did it because it was the right thing to do. And aren't you glad? In our day, when we so love our convenience. You see, what you like about all this stuff is what makes me nervous about it. The convenience of it. Inconvenience is a restraint. And we need restraints on our human nature.
Got that right.
We need it. And here's the point. You're really growing up as a Christian when you put restraints on yourself. And if you don't grow up and learn to put restraints on yourself, God Almighty is going to put them on you.
Got that right.
And I've seen it. So here's somebody that never learns to restrain their appetite, that spends their last days strapped to a hospital bed in absolute misery. Why are they in that restraint? Because when they could, they didn't restrain themselves. How many alcoholics have died a horrible, painful death with all kind of restraints on them because they never learned to control their use of alcohol? So the restraints got put on them. It's food for thought.
You got that right.
And so, here's Jesus. Behold the man. And Charles Spurgeon wrote this about, and I'm going to read it to you. It's eloquent and touching. Commenting on this verse, I am a worm and no man, Psalm 22:6. This verse is a miracle in language. Think about the Son, God in the flesh. The one that could raise the dead, change water to wine, feed a multitude with 5 loaves and 2 fishes and walk on water, saying, I'm a worm. And less than that, and no man. This verse is a miracle in language. How could the Lord of glory be brought to such abasement as to be not only lower than the angels, but even lower than men? I am a worm and no man. What a contrast between I am and I am a worm. Yet such a double nature was found in the person of our Lord Jesus when bleeding on the tree. He felt himself to be comparable to a helpless, powerless, downtrodden worm, passive while crushed and unnoticed and despised by those who trod upon him. How much fight does a worm have? How much strike back does a worm have? How helpless is a worm? He felt himself to be comparable to a helpless, powerless, downtrodden worm, passive while crushed and unnoticed and despised by those who trod upon him. He selects the weakest of creatures, which is all flesh, and becomes, when trodden upon, writhing, quivering flesh, utterly devoid of any might except the strength to suffer. This was a true likeness of himself when his body and soul had become a mass of misery, the very essence of agony. in the dying pangs of crucifixion. Man by nature, according to Job 25:6, is a worm.
Yes.
Man by nature is a worm, but our Lord puts himself even beneath man, and on account of the scorn which was heaped upon him and the weakness which he felt, he adds, and no man. I am a worm and no man. The man became no man, so that I could become a man. He died so I could live. He became sin so I could be made righteousness. He entered the veil of darkness so that I could rejoice in the light. He became all the things I was and all the things I deserve so that I could become what I ought to be. He became no man so I could become a man. Are you a man? If not, grow up.
You got that.
And honor your Savior's death to make you that. And bring your appetites and passions and weaknesses under subjection for the honor of the one that died to give you the power to do it.
Yes.
Do I make myself plain?
Yes.
I know I get passionate, but Jesus is something worthy of being passionate about.
Amen.
My grandson sat in my office with tears in his eyes and told me this: it is all about Jesus and being like Jesus. Yes, my son, that's what it's all about. The privileges and blessings which belong to the fathers he could not obtain while deserted by God. And common acts of humanity were not allowed him, for he was rejected of men. He was outlawed from the society of earth and shut out from the smile of heaven. How utterly did our Savior empty himself of all glory and became of no reputation for our sakes. But there were those who mocked him, who probably thought they were real men because they could make fun of this weakling. And you know what? Those real men that could make fun of this sissy little winkling that's singing on the cross. You saved others, save yourself if you be the Christ. You pitiful little thing. Oh, I guess they really thought they were men because they could go around bullying like that. Well, you know what they're called in Psalm 22 and verse 12? They're called bulls of Bashan, strong bulls of Bashan. I guess that's why they bully, because they're acting like brute bulls. In verse 16, for dogs have compassed me about. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me, and they pierced my hands and feet. You see, picking on others is not a sign of toughness. It is not a sign of being macho. It's just being an animal. And manhood is not being an animal. Manhood is restraining the animal passions. I want to jump ahead to a point here. The bully. You know what a bully really is? It's a weak person that wears a tough exterior in order to cover their internal weakness. The bully, the one that abuses women, berates women, goes around throwing his weight around, he's going to beat up on this person, he's going to beat up on this person, is really a pitiful weakling, compensating with his bullying. Oh, but they all get brought down. Oh, do they ever. The manliest of men became for us a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53:3. Our blessed Lord was the perfection of manhood, and as we examine him, we see in the blessed Savior the perfect balance of firmness and tenderness. There can be no doubt that our blessed Lord displayed courage, firmness, assertiveness, decisiveness, which is critical to courage, dutifulness, and authoritativeness. People that have problems with being indecisive, you know what that really is? That's a lack of courage, because decision requires courage, because courage, decision is commitment to something, to follow through with it. And an indecisive person is therefore a weak person that lacks internal strength, as James 1 will tell us. James 1 and verse 8. A double-minded man, one that's always waffling and can't make up his mind, is unstable. That's weakness in all his ways. I have the book put out by the Marine Corps called War Fighting, and I read this in there. We must have the moral courage to make tough decisions in the face of uncertainty. I have learned as a pastor that many times I have to make decisions with what is for me not quite as much data as I would like, but I have to make a decision, and it takes courage to do that. We have to have the moral courage to make tough decisions in the face of uncertainty and accept full responsibility for those decisions when the natural inclination would be to postpone the decision pending more complete information. To delay action in an emergency because of incomplete information shows lack of moral courage. We do not want to make rash decisions, but we must not squander opportunities while trying to gain more information. Finally, since all decisions must be made in the face of uncertainty, and you know what? That's really true of all of us.
That's it.
Every single one of us has decisions to make in the face of uncertainty, but we have to make them. There enters courage to make it and to be responsible for it. Since all decisions must be made in the face of uncertainty, and since every situation is unique, there is no perfect solution to any battlefield situation. And I've learned in life that in many situations, because have you noticed this life is a battlefield? There are no perfect decisions. Therefore, we should not agonize over one. I always remember something Conrad told me years ago when I was agonizing over some people that were leaving the church and wondering if I'd done enough to try to save them. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, Ben, the question is not, have you done everything that could be done? Have you done sufficient? And I realized I had done sufficient. And if that wasn't going to save them, likely nothing else I was going to do was going to get the job done. And like my mother says, they want to go, let them go. God bless her. The essence of the problem is to select a promising course of action with an acceptable degree of risk and to do it more quickly than our foe. In this respect, a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week. I love that. The man who is afraid to make a decision is a man who lacks courage. Because decision is commitment to an idea or a course of action. And indecisive people shy away from commitment because there's something in it they fear. But Jesus Christ was the perfection of manhood in that he displayed courage, firmness, assertiveness, decisiveness, dutifulness, and authoritativeness. And yet, get it now, this manliest of men, the perfection of manhood, also demonstrated tenderness, gentleness, kindness, compassion, affection. There are some men that think to demonstrate tenderness, gentleness, kindness, compassion, and affection is weakness. No, it isn't. It's a part of being a man. And the man that can't demonstrate that is defective as a man. Because it's part of being a man. And you see this in our blessed Savior. Remember when they brought little children to him? This is in Mark 10, 13 through 16. They brought little children to him to bless, and the disciples rebuked the parents that brought their children, and Jesus said, let them come. And he'd take the little babies in his arms and bless them. This, the mighty Savior, the man, taking little children in his arms to bless them. He wept at the grave of his friend. Shortest verse in the Bible shows that this man knew how to cry. Jesus wept. He wept over the city of Jerusalem. Luke 19, 41 through 44. How many times did he tell his disciples he loved them? Some guys think it's not macho to tell another man, I love you. That's stupid. What are you afraid of? Are you that weak that you can't say to another man out of your manhood, I love you? Jesus did. John 13, 23 through 25. John 13:34. Love me. He said, you love one another as I've loved you. John 15:9. John 15:12. All three places. John 15:9, as the Father loved me, so have I loved you. Verse 12, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I've loved you. And there were times when Jesus would sternly rebuke his disciples when they were wrong. Never forget he stooped to wash their feet in John 13:1-5. Oh, how manly is that? How manly is that? And here, this is the one that gets me. Go over and look at this one. Go over and look at this one. In John 13, and I'm down at verse 23. This was Jesus at the Last Supper. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Here Jesus is reclining there, and this guy's got his head on Jesus' chest. Another man leaning his head on Jesus' chest. Ooh, that sounds weird. That sounds effeminate. What kind of guy would do that? I'll tell you what kind of guy would do it. It was the Apostle John. And you know what Jesus called John and his brother? He called them sons of Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. People think of John as being a weak apostle. No, John was tough. John was tough enough to stand for his convictions and end up exiled alone on the Isle of Patmos. That's how much a man John was. But yet, there was the tenderness. Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spake. And he then lying on Jesus' breast saith unto him, Lord, who is it? He's over there lying on Jesus' breast, and Jesus prophesied somebody's going to betray him. And he said, Lord, who is it? Well, he's lying there on Jesus' breast. And Jesus lets him do it. John was not effeminate. Jesus was not effeminate. But they knew how to show affection and love. There's nothing unmanly about that at all. One of the greatest honors that was ever paid me in my life, I'm going to tattle on you, Jim, was when he was going through a very, very hard time after his open heart surgery. Because there's a lot of emotional struggle when you're coming off of all that sedation the man had been under for 11 hours in a surgery. And that does something to your emotions and to your mind. And he was having a hard time with that. And I remember he was sitting in a chair, and I was sitting in front of him on a footstool. And he told me, he says, I wish I could cry. And something happened. And he let loose. And here, Jim, weep here. And he poured those tears here on me. And that was one of the most precious moments in my entire life, to have that man weep on my shoulder. See, this is what manhood is. It's the balance of firmness with tenderness, assertiveness, authority with compassion and mercy, striving for that balance. And a man that does not show tenderness does not show love as he ought. Because one of the definitions out of a dictionary of love is warm affection. And how many women are starved for expressions of tenderness from their husbands, who were told to cherish them, to treat them with fondness, tenderness, affection. We're even commanded, brethren, in Ephesians 4:32 to be tender-hearted one to another. Because truth known, we'd all be ruined, world without end, if God had not shown tender mercies to us. And that expression, tender mercies, is biblical. Psalm 51:4, Psalm 103, and verse 4. Well, I think I'm done for today. This is what I coughed up yesterday, about the best I could churn up yesterday. But I'm going to close with this. Talking about bullies. You know who the biggest bully in the universe is? The devil.
You got that right.
You know what he is? He's a false accuser.
That's it.
You know, some people, the way they compensate for their weaknesses is they run other people down so they can feel better about themselves, compensating for their weakness upon the backs of others. The devil is the greatest false accuser. And in his foolish attempt to be like the Most High, he has managed to become a 6,000-year-old colossal failure. He needs to compensate. And how does he do it? Running others down. He loves to run you down.
You got that right.
But a little child of God, armed with faith and a Bible, can back down that bully anytime he wants to. And that scares the crap out of him. Amen.